By definition, a tree is a woody perennial plant having a single, usually elongated stem, generally with few or no branches in its lower part. This means that all the plants featured in this video are technically trees, although some of them are very distantly related, and some wouldn't consider them trees. But they all share the same characteristics due to convergent evolution. Before we can cover the first trees, we must first cover when land plants first got on land, which occurred in the Silurian about 430 million years ago. This was before the vertebrates walked on land. All these early plants all resembled ferns or mosses and were generally small, and all used spores for reproduction. Fast forward about 10 million years in the Devonian, and the first tree-like plants evolved. These, called lepidodendrons, were basically large ferns that overcame the hardships of supporting a large vascular system and transporting water and nutrients to their high-up leaves. They could attain heights of about 30 meters, which is about 100 feet tall, and about 1 meter, which is about 3.3 feet wide. These are relatives to the still living club mosses and quillworts. These trees make up the coal layer, so you can thank them for being able to watch this. Like all plants of the time, these trees use spores as a means of reproduction. Flowers and seeds would not be evolved for hundreds of millions of years. Their fruiting bodies resembled cones, called lepidostrobuses, or lepidostrobi. I'm not sure about the plural on that. And they were roughly 2.5 to 4 inches long. The scales on these spore cones vary greatly, all the way from shark-toothed to oar-shaped. One vital weakness of spores is that they have to have a moist environment to sprout, so these trees could not colonize the more inland and drier biomes. These early trees weren't what we know of as trees today. They had a green trunk that was covered in leaves in their youth, and once they fell off, they left a diamond-shaped indent in the bark. This is where lepidodendrons get their name scale trees. Their trunks were defined by an unstable inner layer and a thick bark that stabilized the tree, kind of the opposite to modern trees. Still, these trees were relatively easily knocked over by extreme winds when compared to modern angiosperms and gymnosperms. Before being fully grown, the foliage of these trees grew directly out of their trunks, having leaf-like flaps that photosynthesize and could possess a singular vein or not. It was basically a giant green spike shooting out of the ground, that once matured would branch out and join the canopy. After millions of years of the lepidodendrons dominating the Carboniferous rainforest, selective pressures would code for a more sturdy and hardy trunk and branches, developing into different forms. The closest to modern trees in appearance of these is the Archaeopteris, a species of spore-bearing trees that had buds, reinforced branches, and deep roots. But sadly, these too would go extinct in the following years. Fast forward a couple million years and we come to the Carboniferous rainforest collapse, which occurred about 305 million years ago. This small extinction, although being relatively small in scale, would change the world forever. The causes of it aren't widely accepted, but it's largely assumed to be either climate or volcanic related, with a mix of other factors being accepted as well. The effects of this extinction are often underestimated, causing the world to dry out more and adopt a more arid and less humid environment overall. This split the rainforest, dominated by the lepidodendrons, into smaller subsections that would eventually die off completely. This, in turn, gave a chance for more adaptation, giving rise to the gymnosperms. Surprisingly, a clade that is related to the lepidodendrons still persists today, and has seized a niche in the understory of more tropical forests. These are known as the cyathales and still persist to this day in certain parts of the world. A gymnosperm, by definition, is any plant that contains a seed not encased in an ovary. They do not have flowers or spores, instead releasing pollen into the air from separate male and female reproductive organs. Starting in the Permian period about 248 million years ago, the gymnosperms started to take over the forests of the world, replacing the earlier lepidodendrons because of their superior vascular systems and seeds, which could sprout in more arid conditions that followed the rainforest collapse. Today, there are three widely accepted divisions of the gymnosperms, the first being the ginkgo. It was at this time that the ginkgo tree's ancestor appeared in the fossil record. It seems to have changed little from this time period to the modern day. Only one species exists in this division today, the Ginkgo biloba. The second division of the gymnosperms are known as the cycads. They appeared in the early Permian period, but today are mostly confined to tropical and subtropical climates, so many people in temperate regions, like me, might not even know of their existence. They had a thick trunk below a large crown of thick evergreen leaves that may be confused with palm leaves today. They are not angiosperms and rely on beetles for pollination. They attract these beetles by putting off a sweet minty scent from inside their cones. They are also dioecious, meaning that each tree is either a male or female. Up until the evolution of conifers and angiosperms, cycads were some of the most dominant trees at the time of the dinosaurs, sometimes reaching 18 meters or 60 feet tall. The third division of the gymnosperms, known as the conifers, are the most well-known and widespread today, with their name meaning cone-bearing. There are many families of conifers, the most well-known arguably being the Pinaceae. They were one of the most dominant trees following the Carboniferous rainforest collapse, and quickly diversified into many families, genuses, and species, many of which as descendants live today. Though the gymnosperms were much better suited to the changing climate of their day, they did have many limiting factors that would appear more evident over time. The first being their slow reproductive cycles. Gymnosperms generally have reproductive cycles that on average last about a year and a half, while some angiosperms can reproduce multiple times a year. This may have helped in overcoming new challenges by producing more seeds and therefore more genetic diversity in the gene pool. The gymnosperms' second limitation was not taking advantage of insects for pollination. By choosing to be mostly wind-pollinated, gymnosperms limited their rate of speciation. Insects can spread pollen farther and more effectively than wind, leading to more seeds getting fertilized and leading to more genetic diversity and higher rates of adaptation to new and changing environments. Their third limitation lies in their seeds. Gymnosperms have naked seeds, having no protection or extra nutrients to live off of in case it doesn't make it to the ground. Angiosperms, on the other hand, have an enclosed system that provides extra nutrients and protection from the elements, animals, and can serve other purposes, as in the case of black walnuts and their juglone. Their fourth limitation is in their seed dispersal. Gymnosperms' seeds are naked and therefore not adapted for dispersal like angiosperms are. A good example are berries and drupes, which have specifically evolved to be eaten by animals and have the seeds dispersed wherever that animal travels. An angiosperm, by definition, is a flowering, fruit-bearing plant or tree known for having ovules, and therefore seeds develop within an enclosed ovary. Virtually everything you eat is an angiosperm. This includes common fruits like tomatoes, apples, pears, avocados, all the way to potatoes, wheat, everything like that. Around 150 million years ago to 100 million years ago, the first angiosperms, or hardwoods, appeared in the fossil record. This is about the same time that Pangaea was splitting up. The angiosperms held many advantages, as previously stated, over the conifers and cycads and ginkgos. Some of these were their superior seeds, dispersal mechanisms, reproductive cycles, and insect pollination. These angiosperms quickly took over many conifer and cycad-dominated areas and pushed them out. From here, the angiosperms quickly radiated into many different species because of their ability to produce more genetic diversity at a faster rate than their competition. This let the angiosperms diversify and speciate rapidly, taking over the globe relatively fast. There exists a hypothesis called angiosperm radiation hypothesis, and it is thought that the evolution of primates was helped along with the evolution of angiosperms, with flowering trees and plants providing food, shelter, and cover from predators for the early primates. So if this hypothesis holds true, you have some 100 million year old trees to thank for being here. When most people think of angiosperms, if they know what an angiosperm is, they think of flowers, because flowers define the angiosperms. They're simply the reproductive parts of the angiosperms. They possess different colors, scents, and shapes in order to let insects and other pollinators get nectar and pollinate them without the plants having to do any of the work. This helps greatly with genetic diversity spreading throughout a population. Some of you may be asking, well, I've never seen an oak or a hickory tree have flowers before. Are they angiosperms? And the answer is yes. They possess something called a catkin, which is a petalless drupe of wind-pollinated flowers. When pollinated, some of these resemble the cones of conifers. These flowers inject pollen into the air, which is carried by the wind to other trees, similar to the gymnosperms. You've probably seen these on the sides of roads or under their parent trees, sometimes becoming a nuisance because of their sheer quantity of numbers. In modern times, our forests are dominated by the angiosperms, but in certain areas you may find coniferous populations as well. In more isolated areas of the tropics, there are remnants of the cycads and even some fern trees. I hope that with this video I have changed your view on the trees that we take for granted and showed you their long evolutionary past. If you're interested in more tree-related content such as growing guides, then make sure to like the video and subscribe. Remember to grow native and have a good one.